Hi, Nancy. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm very, very good. Thank you so much for being willing to come on and talk a little bit about your experiences.
Okay.
What I'd really like to do is talk about the 1954 experience that you had. Do you think you could just start off by describing what happened?
Yes. We were in Maine, taking my brother up to the University of Maine, and we had stopped over at Moosehead Lake, which is pretty far up in Maine. It's a pretty rural area, very rural Maine. And actually, it was a normal day up until we went to bed, and I was awakened sometime in the early morning hours. Strangely enough, I was awakened by a presence that was in the room with me, and I felt that my bed was surrounded by something. And I actually found myself very frightened and found it impossible to speak out loud. I couldn't call to my mother or anyone else in the house, or the cabin, I should say. And I couldn't move. And I felt like I was being observed by a number of creatures, if you want to call it that, or people or whatever. It was I've never been that frightened in my life. I've never been unable to move or communicate with somebody. I could barely move my hands or my feet. I was just frozen. And this went on for a long time. It was daybreak before I can remember suddenly finding myself released and able to move.
So did you perceive yourself ever leaving the room, or do you think you stayed in the bed?
No, I think I was being observed. I don't think I ever physically left the room.
Okay.
I think I was being observed for some unknown reason, and it was a very, very frightening feeling.
And did you get a good look at the creatures? Could you describe them or anything?
No, it was very, very hazy, but because it was very dark. It wasn't until the sun started coming up in the morning that some light came in the room, and that's why I said I was in that rather terrifying, and having that terrifying experience for a number of hours because it was dark, and until the sun started coming up, and there was a big window in my room, and I was able to make out something, and I think that's when I was released.
So you couldn't describe like how tall they were or anything like that?
No, I couldn't tell you that. I can't.
And have you had any other experiences beyond that? I mean, I think you had some later on.
Later on, yes. Many years later on, as a matter of fact, when we had our home in Sheffield, Massachusetts, incidents happened again. And actually, it started with my sons.
Yes.
It wasn't so much directly with me, although I had never forgotten that. And when I'm talking to you about it right now, I can feel it exactly as it was in 1954. It was that frightening. But the connection seemed to come with Thomas and Matthew. And we lived on a farm, which is very far out of town. It was another very rural area. And they... whatever it was, I'll call them aliens for lack of another word, actually, they seemed to want to connect with them, my children. It wasn't so much myself. I was there. I remember the incidents very well from my perspective. Thomas and Matthew, of course, were intricately involved in the incidences, so they have the more details than I do. Mine was... for instance, when they were missing, trying to find them when they were missing from the house, that kind of a thing. I'm sure Thomas has talked to you about this anyway. So,
are you aware that your mother or anyone else in your past family has had any kind of experiences like this?
My mother, not in the past, but she was living with us at the time, in the 60s when we had the farm, when a lot of the incidents happened to Matthew and Thomas. And she also experienced some of, especially when we were riding back in the station wagon, that incident. My mother was there and very much involved with that. She did not interact that much with the actual experiences. She was very old at the time. When these incidents happened with Matthew and Thomas, I was the one that was looking for them, and I was the one that was, Matthew tried to awaken me at one point, and I couldn't wake up, and I had no idea why. So, my mother did not experience much of the experiences.
Right. And when you first found the boys, how did that happen? After that experience in Sheffield?
Okay, I left the house when I realized that they were missing. That was also during the nighttime. We had floodlights around the house, and I turned them all on, and I went out looking for them because they never left home, and they shared the same room together. I went all over our property. We had 80 acres, so I started just running all over the trails and the driveway and that kind of thing, looking for them. And I was up on the Appalachian Trail, and when I looked back down, I could see something that looked like them, and they had been returned to the driveway, and that's where I found them. And they were not themselves at all.
And, of course, you were in Indiana when Matthew had his 2009 experience, right?
That is true. That is true. And I tell you, it's like unbelievable. And actually, the experiences at the farm were very frightening, and I really have to give my sons credit for pursuing this for so long, because they have many more details than I do. They were much more involved than I was, but it's very tough to come out of the closet with this kind of information and not be thought of as somebody who's hallucinating or whatever. And actually, I just have to give them a lot of credit for pursuing this. They've talked about it, and as a family, we've talked about it for years. And also in 1954, just jumping back because I forgot to mention something to you, my girlfriend had ridden up to Maine with us also, and she had a similar experience the same night that I did, so I was not the only one.
Oh, really?
In the cabin that experienced that. That was not just me.
That's interesting.
Yes. I forgot to mention that, and I apologize for that.
So how do you feel looking back?
I don't talk about it much, and I don't even like to talk about it, to be perfectly honest with you. But I've always felt that the experiences were mostly something from another aliens that were actually trying to communicate with us and learn something about us. It's frightening because of the way these experiences came about. But in actuality, I don't think it was meant for harm. I think it was more like a biological thing where they wanted to see how we operated here or something. Observing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
To change my beliefs, because I believe that we're all part of a creation. I think we're all part of a larger world. So the fact that I am frightened was probably strangeness. They didn't hurt me physically. But I certainly knew that they were in control of me, and as I understand it from Thomas and Matthew, their experience is related to sort of the same thing. So they wanted to find out something, I think, actually, and maybe they did. It's odd that it follows our family. That's a very strange thing. But it has, and it's been going on and off since 1954, which is a lengthy time. It's
very much so.
I'm an old man.
Yeah.
I'm a very old lady, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. So I hope I don't know if I'm helping you or not, but
absolutely.
Well, any information that you really wanted or not. But
no, absolutely. It's all fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on and just talk a little bit about your experiences. I know that you've got a lot going on there, and thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that.
Not at all. It's been my pleasure.